The galaxy had grown arrogant. After centuries of conquest, the coalition of stellar powers had come to believe that war was little more than a calculated routine. A campaign began with fleets blotting out the sky, orbital bombardments carving landscapes into smoking glass, and armored legions marching across the ruins with precision. Resistance had long ceased to surprise them. Every world had fallen in turn, some quickly, others with admirable but doomed defiance. They had seen swords and arrows raised against plasma fire, crude rockets against planetary shields, even worlds attempting to fight back with feral beasts trained for battle. All had failed, and so the coalition grew comfortable, even theatrical in its scorn. When Earth came under their attention, the reaction was no different. Reports flowed in. An underdeveloped world rich in resources but militarily stagnant. Their weapons were ballistic, reliant on chemical combustion. Their fleets a collection of fragile hulls barely capable of defending orbit. The council laughed openly. Stone and powder, one commander sneered. They fight with sparks and tubes. Another added, let them bring their toys. We'll make a sport of it. In their arrogance, they announced the campaign would serve as training for new recruits. The invasion began, as it always did. Starships descended like gods of fire, rattling the sky with thunder. Cities trembled, communications collapsed, and the people of Earth watched as alien banners unfurled above the clouds. Yet Earth did not collapse. Governments fractured at first, but quickly united, their leaders grimly aware that survival demanded cooperation. Hidden bunkers filled with generals and tacticians mapped defenses on digital screens, their voices sharp with urgency. They understood the scale of the enemy. Tens of thousands of soldiers clad in armor that shimmered against bullets, machines that hovered with gravitic engines, and weapons designed to vaporize targets rather than pierce them. Against such power, Earth's armies seemed obsolete. But desperation breeds creativity, and humans had a long history of fighting against overwhelming odds. Where tanks and jets would be obliterated from orbit, other options emerged. Guerrilla strategies were proposed, asymmetric warfare drawn from centuries of insurgency and counterinsurgency. Satellites fell, but forests remained. Cities burned, but mountain passes and deep valleys still held secrets. Earth had no intention of playing by the coalition's rules. Among the names drawn into the war effort, one carried a weight of whispered reputation: Staff Sergeant David Keller, a sniper whose career spanned countless tours and conflicts no one outside Earth cared to remember. He was not young, though not yet old, a man forged by patient discipline and sharpened instincts. In every file that recorded his service, the same words repeated: calm under fire, precise, unseen until too late. When asked to volunteer for what amounted to a near-suicidal posting, he simply nodded, as though this war was no different from the others. He was deployed to a forested region the coalition had dismissed as irrelevant. To them, terrain was a triviality. Their armor could stride over rivers. Their drones scan kilometers with ease. Their weapons render trees into ash. They did not understand what it meant for a man to vanish among the shadows of branches, to disappear into the folds of moss and bark. David understood. The forest was not his disadvantage, but his shield, one older than steel and still undefeated by technology. As Earth's generals debated strategies in underground bunkers, David lay silent on damp soil, adjusting the scope of a rifle older in design than the invaders themselves. The coalition's analysts had labeled such weapons as archaic projectiles propelled by chemical force. They had not accounted for the fact that the very lack of electronic signature made them invisible to scanners. Where plasma rifles burned with detectable energy and drones pulsed signals across frequencies, David's rifle remained a whisper in the void. The first alien patrol entered the forest days after the landing. They moved in columns, armor gleaming beneath shafts of sunlight, confident in their superiority. Their voices carried in guttural tones, dismissing the silence around them as harmless. To them, the forest was quaint, perhaps even beautiful in its way, but certainly no threat. Their scanners reported nothing unusual. No heat blooms beyond animals. No energy readings to suggest weaponry. Their arrogance thickened like fog. David watched them through his scope, heart steady, breath measured. Each second was weighed against decades of experience. He knew the coalition considered humans backward, weak, laughable. He felt no anger toward them. Anger distracted, blurred vision. Instead, he felt a quiet certainty. They would learn. His finger brushed the trigger with practiced ease. The sound was minimal, a muted thud lost among bird calls and rustling leaves. The effect, however, was immediate. One alien collapsed, helmet shattered, a plume of blood spraying across moss. The others froze, confused, looking skyward as though struck from above. They shouted orders, scanning with devices that revealed nothing. David remained motionless, invisible, part of the earth itself. The coalition's soldiers regrouped, muttering in agitation. Their armor shifted, visors flaring with light as they attempted to detect thermal anomalies. Still nothing. One soldier gestured broadly, mocking the primitive nature of humans, declaring the kill must have been luck, a stray trap, or accident. David exhaled slowly, adjusting his aim. A second shot cracked the air, and another alien fell, armor useless against the simple velocity of a bullet. Confusion spread like wildfire. Shouts turned into frantic commands, and weapons discharged blindly into the trees. Bolts of plasma tore bark into ash, branches raining down in smoldering fragments. But the forest swallowed the chaos, its vastness offering infinite places to hide. David moved barely an inch, shifting just enough to avoid detection, his camouflage blending seamlessly with roots and shadows. Far away, in the coalition command vessel orbiting high above, reports began filtering in. Casualties from a patrol. No identifiable enemy signatures. The commander frowned, dismissing it as incompetence or malfunction. "It is a forest," he muttered. "Burn it and be done." Yet beneath his words lingered the first faint trace of unease. On Earth's side, the generals received news of the encounter with cautious optimism. One sniper, one rifle, 2 confirmed kills against soldiers who believed themselves untouchable. It was a small victory, but victories were rare enough to be treasured. For David, there was no celebration. He cleaned the rifle, checked his ammunition, and waited. He knew the patrols would return, stronger, angrier, more determined. That was good. The more they searched, the deeper they would walk into his domain. Night fell over the forest, stars glimmering through the canopy. David lay awake, listening to the distant hum of alien machines, the heavy tread of armored boots echoing faintly. His eyes closed briefly, but his mind remained sharp, calculating angles, distances, timing. The galaxy had mocked Earth's weapons. Tomorrow, they would learn humility one bullet at a time. The forest grew restless with the weight of alien presence. Each day their patrols pressed deeper into the green labyrinth, armored columns trampling moss, scanners sweeping in wide arcs, voices sharp with irritation. The coalition commanders had issued stern orders after the first losses. The human sniper was to be hunted, flushed, and destroyed. To soldiers accustomed to burning cities into glass, the task seemed beneath them, yet the sting of casualties gnawed at their pride. What had begun as amusement now demanded vengeance. David lay in silence, the damp earth molding around him as though the forest itself conspired to keep him hidden. His body ached from stillness, but his mind remained sharp, disciplined by years of waiting for the perfect shot. The rifle rested steady in his hands, its scope reflecting only the faintest sliver of light. Each patrol offered temptation, but he resisted the urge to fire too quickly. Every bullet mattered. Every kill must count. A squad of 6 advanced through the undergrowth, their armor shifting with faint metallic sighs. One carried a drone perched on a shoulder mount, its sensor array spinning like an insect's eye. David studied it carefully, memorizing its rotation, its blind spots, the interval at which it swept the canopy. The alien spoke in guttural bursts, confident yet wary, their movements tighter now, less careless than before. Fear had begun its slow infiltration. His crosshairs settled on the drone operator. A single squeeze of the trigger and the soldier crumpled, the drone clattering uselessly to the ground. Shouts erupted, weapons blazing as bolts of plasma lit the trees in violent bursts of blue. Birds scattered, smoke curled from burning bark, and the forest shuddered under the onslaught. Yet the sniper had already shifted position, belly crawling with deliberate precision, each movement concealed by roots and shadow. The remaining aliens closed ranks, shouting coordinates, firing in wide arcs. They advanced toward the fallen soldier, their formation compact, their panic palpable. David exhaled and took another shot. A second alien collapsed, the bullet piercing through the joint in its armor where no scanner could protect. Screams followed, confusion swelling like a storm. Their weapons grew frantic, and the patrol commander barked orders that sounded more like desperation than control. In orbit, reports cascaded into the coalition command vessel. A pattern was emerging. Patrols dispatched into the forest failed to return intact, sometimes not at all. Sensors detected no energy discharges consistent with enemy weapons, no signatures of advanced technology. The enemy was invisible. The commander slammed a clawed hand against the console, demanding answers from his analysts. How does stone kill steel? How does silence kill soldiers? The analysts shifted uneasily, unable to explain. On Earth's side, the generals monitored intercepted transmissions. They saw the beginnings of doubt among the coalition, the cracks forming in an army that had never truly tasted resistance. The sniper's actions were more than mere kills. They were symbols, proof that the invaders could bleed. David had become the embodiment of that defiance, though he himself thought nothing of it. For him, it was work, one shot at a time, one ghostly retreat deeper into the forest after every strike. The aliens adapted, or tried to. Larger patrols were dispatched, accompanied by hovering drones and mechs that churned the ground beneath their heavy steps. Yet the very size of these forces slowed them, made them clumsy in terrain that resisted machines. Fallen logs, uneven ground, tangled roots, all became obstacles, forcing their lines into predictable channels. David used those channels to his advantage, anticipating their paths, positioning himself where they must pass. One afternoon, a dozen soldiers moved cautiously through a ravine carpeted with ferns. Their commander barked at them to maintain spacing, but nerves tightened the formation. David watched, patient, eyes flicking from target to target. He chose the point man, a soldier sweeping his weapon in rigid arcs. The shot was clean, the helmet erupting as the body toppled into the ravine floor. Chaos followed. The commander shouted for calm, but another shot answered, dropping the rear guard. The formation collapsed, soldiers turning in circles, firing blindly. Plasma blasts tore through ferns, setting foliage ablaze. Smoke rose, curling upward, masking the forest in a haze of heat and ash. David slid backward, low and deliberate, using the confusion as cover. The aliens never saw him leave. That evening, the coalition fleet received another grim tally. Entire units had vanished, their signals blinking out without explanation. The commander raged, demanding orbital strikes to scour the forest. But tactical officers warned of the risks. Earth's resistance might scatter, regroup, and strike elsewhere. The coalition prided itself on surgical campaigns, not uncontrolled firestorms. To unleash such destruction would be to admit weakness. In his concealed nest, David cleaned his rifle by touch, the ritual steadying his mind. He thought of the men he once served with, comrades lost in wars no alien would ever hear of. Their ghosts lingered in the back of his mind, reminding him of the cost of hesitation. Every pull of the trigger was not just survival. It was repayment for every city reduced to ash, every civilian dragged from shelter, every arrogant laugh of those who believed Earth was already theirs. Night descended, cloaking the forest in deeper shadows. The alien patrols grew hesitant, their voices hushed, the their movements cautious. Superstition crept in, whispered rumors of a phantom that struck without warning. Soldiers claimed to hear breathing in the trees, footsteps that vanished when followed. Fear gnawed at their discipline. For an army that had never known doubt, the effect was corrosive. David watched them with cold eyes, his body merging with the earth. He did not gloat, did not smile at their terror. For him, fear was a tool, not a prize. He used it carefully, sparingly, to shape the battlefield in his favor. He let them retreat sometimes, spared them so their stories would spread. Each survivor became a carrier of dread, an unwitting weapon turned against their own ranks. By dawn, the coalition command vessel seethed with unease. The commander ordered reinforcements, heavier units, even armored walkers designed for siege. Yet beneath the fury was doubt, a subtle recognition that the forest had become a trap, that a single human with a rifle had bent the rhythm of their advance. They could burn villages and shatter mountains, but here, among the trees, they were prey. David sipped from canteen, eyes scanning the mist that clung to the forest floor. The silence stretched, heavy with anticipation. He knew the next move would come soon. A larger force, perhaps even a desperate gamble from the coalition. He wiped his mouth, steadied his hands, and rested his cheek against the rifle stock once more. The galaxy's armies had mocked Earth's weapons. They were no longer laughing. The forest no longer belonged to the coalition. It had turned into a haunted expanse, a place where shadows carried death and silence carried dread. The aliens marched through it in formation, weapons raised, sensors sweeping, but their discipline had begun to unravel. Every snap branch felt like a threat. Every flicker of movement in the undergrowth drew panicked fire. They had been conditioned to dominate, not to fear. Now fear was rewriting them. David lay motionless beneath a lattice of roots, his rifle angled through a narrow gap that revealed the path below. A column of alien soldiers advanced with exaggerated caution, their armor reflecting the pale light that filtered through the canopy. He studied them without haste, tracking the cadence of their movements, the subtle tremors in their posture. They were not confident anymore. They were waiting for him. He let them pass, resisting the instinct to fire. Sometimes restraint carried more power than action. Let them stew in uncertainty. Let the thought grow heavier with every step. Why has the sniper not struck? When will it come? By the time he finally squeezed the trigger, they would already be broken inside. Far above, in the orbiting vessel, the coalition commander seethed. Reports painted the same humiliating picture. Patrols diminished, morale eroding, casualties mounting. Soldiers described an enemy they could not see, an enemy that defied every scanner, every drone, every protocol. He is one man, the commander growled, slamming a fist against the tactical display. One man cannot fight an army. Yet the facts remained, stubborn and undeniable. An army was being undone by a single rifle. In Earth's bunkers, analysts pored over intercepted transmissions. They saw the strain in the alien voices, the disbelief curdling into fear. Generals leaned over the data, exchanging grim but hopeful glances. If one sniper could fracture the enemy's psyche, what might happen if others followed his methods? David was no longer just a soldier. He was proof that humanity's defiance could bleed into the cracks of an empire. The coalition responded with escalation. Heavy walkers stomped through the undergrowth, towering constructs bristling with cannons, their footfalls shaking the forest floor. Drones circled overhead in tight grids, scanners humming. Squads advanced in overlapping arcs, each soldier covering the other, each step measured and deliberate. To an outside observer, it was a display of overwhelming control. To David, it was an opportunity. He had studied armies long enough to recognize their habits. Larger forces moved slower. Coordination tethered them to predictable rhythms. The walkers, despite their power, funneled infantry into narrow lanes to avoid friendly fire. Drones, bound to preset sweeps, left moments of blindness in their rotations. It was in those moments he thrived. He waited until the column reached a choke point where the path narrowed between two ridges. The aliens moved carefully, but their tight formation betrayed them. David sighted the officer at the center, a figure issuing clip commands. The shot was clean, precise, final. The officer crumpled instantly, his voice silenced mid-order. The effect was electric. Soldiers froze, eyes darting wildly. The walkers halted, cannons swiveling aimlessly, drones circling in frantic loops. Shouts echoed through the trees, but none of them coherent. Their cohesion fractured in an instant. Some fired into the ridges, others dove for cover, others simply froze, unwilling to move. David shifted position, belly sliding through the damp earth. He emerged at a new angle, sighted a drone operator, and fired again. Sparks erupted, the drone spinning into the ground. A third shot followed, striking the leg joint of a walker. The machine staggered, its massive weight tipping into the trees with a crash that shook birds into the air. By the time the aliens regrouped, the sniper had vanished. The forest returned to silence, broken only by the crackle of small fires and the groans of the fallen walker. Soldiers huddled behind cover, their discipline gone, their courage frayed. For the first time in their history, they were prey. The commander received the report in disbelief. An entire column disrupted, a walker disabled, an officer dead, all without a single enemy signature detected. Rage boiled inside him, but beneath it lay something far more dangerous, doubt. He had never faced an enemy that fought like this. They had no pattern, no rhythm, no respect for the rules of war as the coalition understood them. David watched from his concealed nest, cleaning his rifle with the slow, meticulous care of ritual. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction. This was work brutal and simple, yet he knew what it meant. Every kill was not just the removal of a soldier. It was a message carved into the enemy's psyche. You are not invincible. You can be hunted. Nights stretched long, filled with alien searchlights cutting through the trees. Entire sectors of forest were scoured with plasma fire, turning groves into scorched wastelands. But David never lingered where destruction fell. He moved with the forest, flowing like water around obstacles, never where they expected him. By dawn, the aliens had burned acres of land, but they had not touched him. Within their ranks, superstition festered. Soldiers whispered of a phantom cloaked in earth and shadow, a spirit of the planet itself. Some refused to enter the forest, feigning equipment failures, others trembling at the thought of patrol duty. Fear spread faster than orders could contain it, undermining the very foundation of the coalition's control. David saw the change in their eyes through his scope. They no longer looked outward with arrogance. Their gazes flicked constantly, searching shadows, haunted by the inevitability of his strike. He had become more than a sniper to them. He was inevitability itself. Back in the orbiting vessel, the commander summoned his war council. He demanded strategies, demanded explanations, demanded solutions. None came. Analysts stammered about low-tech anomalies, about the unpredictability of humans, about how their very primitiveness was their shield. The commander dismissed them all with fury, but the seed of fear had already taken root. David lay awake beneath the stars, listening to the hum of distant engines, the shuffle of alien patrols moving like frightened children in the dark. His body ached, his ammunition ran low, but his spirit was steady. He thought of Earth, scarred but unbroken, and he felt the weight of his role. He was no longer just fighting for survival. He was shaping the war. When dawn came again, he was ready. He adjusted his scope, settled his breathing, and became once more the silence between heartbeats. The forest belonged to him, and through him, it belonged to Earth. The coalition had tried to crush humanity with overwhelming power, but power faltered when fear hollowed its core. And David was fear incarnate. The coalition's patience broke. Weeks of hunting had yielded nothing but casualties, and the humiliation festered like an untreated wound. Soldiers whispered of curses, of a ghost that could not be seen or stopped. Commanders raged, demanding discipline, but fear had already infected the ranks. The council convened aboard the flagship, their voices sharp, their pride brittle. The decision was unanimous. The sniper must be destroyed at any cost. An elite detachment was formed, hand-picked veterans clad in reinforced armor, accompanied by war beasts and shielded drones. At their head marched Commander Vare, a towering figure who had led campaigns across half the galaxy. His reputation was iron, his voice cold, his certainty absolute. "He bleeds like any animal," Vare declared to his troops. "Tonight, we end the Phantom." The soldiers cheered, though their eyes betrayed doubt. In the forest below, David felt the change before he saw it. The air grew heavier, the silence sharper. He had faced patrols, squads, even armored walkers, but this was different. This was the Coalition's answer, their best, their last measure before admitting defeat. He adjusted his rifle, checked his dwindling ammunition, and allowed a thin smile to touch his lips. They were finally taking him seriously. The column advanced with brutal precision. Drones swept in overlapping grids, their sensors tuned to pick up even the faintest anomaly. War beasts sniffed the air, low growls rumbling in their throats. Soldiers moved in silence, disciplined and tight. At the center strode Vare, his armor etched with scars from battles won. He exuded confidence, a man, or whatever he was, who had never known failure. David did not rush. He studied them with the same patience that had carried him through every war. The drones moved in patterns he recognized, their blind spots brief but exploitable. The beasts troubled him more. They sensed in ways machines could not. He shifted his position carefully, letting the wind carry his scent away, pressing his body deeper into the Earth's embrace. The first shot was deliberate. A drone operator fell, his machine spiraling into the canopy with a shriek of tearing metal. Instantly the formation reacted, shields raised, weapons scanning. Vare barked orders, his voice steady, commanding calm. David slid back, heart steady, lungs measured. He knew this battle would not be like the others. This would be decided by endurance, by nerve, by who blinked first. The beast sniffed, then growled, pulling handlers toward his position. Plasma fire ripped through the brush, searing air, shattering wood. David rolled, low and silent, slipping into a hollow between roots. His rifle snapped once more, and a handler dropped. The beast howled, thrashing wildly, its rage disrupting the formation. Another opening, another shot, another soldier crumpled. Yet the aliens did not break. They advanced methodically, pressing him tighter, forcing him to move more often, to risk exposure. For the first time, David felt the squeeze of true pressure. His camouflage was good, his patience better, but they were learning, adapting. Vare was no fool. The commander raised a hand, and the troops halted. His voice rang out across the trees, amplified by his armor. "Human, you think yourself clever, but you are one man. You cannot hold forever. Your rifle will empty, your body will tire, and then you will fall like all the others." His words carried no mockery, only grim certainty. David listened, unmoving, his cheek pressed against cool soil. He thought of the truth in those words. Yes, he was one man. Yes, his ammunition was finite, his strength limited. Yet war was not always about who endured longest. Sometimes it was about who struck first, who carved fear deepest. He whispered to himself, as he had in other wars, one shot at a time. Through the scope, he found Vare. The commander moved with deliberate caution, shielded, confident his armor could repel primitive rounds. David studied him, memorizing the rhythm of his steps, the faint gaps when he turned to issue commands. Armor was strong, but nothing was perfect. Every system had a seam. The moment came when Vare raised his hand to signal a flank. The motion lifted the plating near his neck, exposing a sliver of vulnerable flesh. David's breath stilled. His world narrowed to the curve of the crosshairs, the pressure of his finger. The rifle barked softly. The bullet found its mark. Vare staggered, eyes wide, voice choking. He fell to one knee, clawing at his throat, disbelief painted across his face. His soldiers shouted in shock, rushing to shield him, but it was too late. The great commander of countless campaigns toppled into the dirt, lifeless. Silence crashed over the forest. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then panic spread. Without Veer's voice, without his presence anchoring them, the soldiers faltered. Drones wavered. Beasts snarled aimlessly. Formations dissolved into chaos. David fired again, then again, each shot cutting down leaders, amplifying the disorder. What had been an elite detachment became a fleeing mob, scattering into the trees, leaving behind their fallen. The retreat echoed through the coalition fleet like a wound torn open. Reports of Veer's death rippled across channels, disbelief giving way to horror. An empire that had mocked Earth's weapons now trembled before a man with a rifle. Their command structure fractured, their morale collapsed. Within days, the campaign was abandoned, fleets pulling back into the void, unwilling to face the phantom in the forests any longer. On the ground, David lay still as the echoes of battle faded. His rifle lay across his chest, warm from the fight, nearly empty. He did not cheer, did not rise in triumph. He simply exhaled, long and slow, and closed his eyes for a moment. Another war, another field of ghosts. When he finally stood, the forest seemed quieter, its wounds smoking but alive. He packed his rifle with care, slung it over his shoulder, and began the long walk back toward human lines. He thought of the galaxy beyond, watching Earth now with wary eyes. They had come expecting conquest. They had left carrying scars. The world would learn of the sniper who broke an empire's pride. Tales would grow, legends would spread, his name whispered as both myth and man. But David Keller cared little for legend. He cared only for the silence of the forest, for the knowledge that his people still stood. The galaxy had mocked Earth's weapons. Now it would remember them.